Welcome to the Lawyers Weekly Show for an in-depth look at the issues facing the legal profession.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Lawyers Weekly Show. My name's Jerome Doraisamy. I'm coming to you today from Camaragal Land in Sydney, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Janine Clark, who has come all the way from Brisbane for this recording. She's a partner at Clyde Co. Hello, Janine.
Hi, Jerome. It's very lovely to be here today.
It's lovely to have you. Now, today we are going to be talking about the proliferation of concussion in women's sport. What are the legal implications arising from all of these injuries that we are seeing, and how best lawyers like Janine can be of service to their clientele. Janine, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. It's a chat that we've not had on this show before, but it is a hugely important topic, as we were just saying off air, and I'm really keen to learn more. Before we dive into all things concussion and personal injury more broadly, I guess, tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, and the work that you do.
Well, Jerome, how long is a piece of string? We could be here all day. I am, as you said, a partner at Clyde Co. I am in the catastrophic injury and large loss team. I have a particular interest in, obviously, personal injuries and property damage, but more so personal injuries. I practiced in London for a long time doing the asbestos claims, mesothelioma claims, and a lot of the insurance issues around that. And then got into motor, where I did a lot of head injury work. Lots of people on motorcycles seem to have head injuries. So for your listeners, motorcycles are bad.
Yeah.
Lots of head injuries. And so this particular subject, which we will get onto, is interesting to me from a head injury background, and also from a without being alarmist, an industrial disease background, because, proliferation of a certain type of claim, is something we've dealt with before, and, we're alive to the trends in it. So my background, predominantly personal injuries and catastrophic injury, sort of positions me to spot those trends a lot quicker, I would say.
And just as a side note to what you were saying there about motorbikes, I'm curious to know how many of those kinds of injuries would result out of not wearing helmets. I've got an 18-month-old at home, and we're trying to get him onto one of those little bikes that don't have the pedals, but we want him to wear the helmet, and he's refusing, so he's not allowed on the bike yet. But yeah, well, from what you saw when you were working in that particular space, what were the lack of helmets a problem, or is that just a bit of a misconception?
No. Helmets are really effective with sort of strike injuries and sort of more blunt force trauma, but with your whiplash type injuries, the contra coup force, where the brain sort of rattles around in the skull a bit, the helmets are not as effective. But when you're dealing with sort of high speed, motorcycle collisions, you're in a worse position without a helmet. Yeah.
There's probably an obvious answer to this question, but why is working in this space in the law so meaningful for you? No doubt you like the idea of helping people, and it is hugely important to help vulnerable or affected people. But what is it about this kind of legal work that gets you out of bed?
Two things. Firstly, balance. So when people ask me, why is it that you act for big insurers and not the people? My answer to that is, I'm the balance. I'm the person who evaluates the claims. I'm the person who makes sure that, where there is liability, the right settlement is being put forward and negotiated, because ultimately that all impacts premiums. And the impact on premium affects small businesses. So we are, to an extent, sort of preventing surges in claims or high value, higher than what we would expect, claims being brought forward into the market, which may harm businesses through premiums, basically.
So in a sense then, Janine, you can sort of act as a bit of a gatekeeper to ensure that ultimately everyone can benefit, whether it's the individual on the ground and those who are providing that cover.
And exactly, and we're very sensible people. I mean, I know it's very scary for plaintiffs or claimants to come into a mediation or into an informal settlement conference. We have to have them in Queensland as part of our action protocols under the Personal Injuries Proceedings Act. We move things along to what we call a compulsory conference. So I'm the person who sits across the table from the injured person, makes submissions about their claim, interacts with them, and that's a responsibility to treat them, with fairness and kindness, and appreciate that it's very brave of them to come into a room full of lawyers when they have suffered a trauma and talk about it with us.
Yeah. Now, Janine, let's talk about concussion in women's sport. Now, this is something that I have observed myself, being a big football fan and, religiously watching the Matildas whenever they play. But I've certainly been reading a lot and hearing a lot more about the proliferation of concussion in women's sport. Would you mind giving us a bit of a lay of the land?
Yeah, so it's all come about, obviously, the Kickstarter of it all, mind the pun, is the NFL in America. And we saw that, I think it's up to, I checked recently, it's over $1 billion in settlement for footballers who've suffered CTE or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Yeah. And I was asked to look into it a few years ago from the men's side, and think, because we had a few claims get going in rugby with the McManus and Knight case, and start to really think about whether this was going to be an emerging trend. And as I was doing my research for this, and particularly into the medicine, I came across some studies by Dr. Elizabeth Williams in Swansea, who said, well, actually, women are more prone to concussion injuries than men. And This is because of the sort of axons, so the connective tissue in a woman's brain is more delicate than that of a man.
Oh, wow.
So these repetitive subconcussive hits over time, can lead to quite, damage to the brain, up to CTE. And then I was, reading about in the AFLW, we had Jacinta Barclay, who died by suicide, aged 29. We had Heather Anderson, also died by suicide in her 20s. And I started looking at this, and I'm thinking, wow, this is a problem. We're focusing so much on men, and they're getting all the, spotlight, and rightly so. There's a lot of them going through with the class actions in both rugby, league and union, and AFL. But what about our girls?
Yeah.
And that interested me.
Yeah, well, absolutely. We're chatting with Janine Clark, and we'll be back with more right after this. Janine, I think a lot of us who don't practice law in this space will have become more familiar with this phenomenon of CTE through popular culture. There was a Will Smith movie called Concussion a number of years ago, which you might have seen, and it seems incredibly scary. As a degenerative brain disease. And of course, it can impact so many sports, not just rugby and football and NFL, but also cricket and wrestling and boxing. Of course, boxing. And I didn't know that women are more prone to this. Is this something that is relatively new as a discovery, or is it something we've known about for a while and we're only just starting to talk about it?
I think, and I would have to double check this for you, but I think Dr. Elizabeth Williams' study is around 2012. And this is about the time that we see women really push on in sport. So I was interviewing Karina Brown for a Women in Insurance AGM event last week, and she was saying that, about 2012 was when the, NRLW was sort of kicking off for her. And so I think, and that's when I think Dr. Elizabeth Williams started really looking at both sexes to see the impact of concussion on them. Mm-hmm. And she came up with putting sensors in the mouth guards of players. And that's when she realised that women took more hits than men. And then she also knew from a sort of neurological point of view, women's brains were, the connective tissue was more delicate. So she put that together. So, yeah, sure, it's new-ish. But no, we're not talking about it, I don't think, as much as we should be. I mean, Jess Hallorahan is. She's a journalist for The Australian. She writes quite a lot about it, and she's very passionate about that. And it was a delight to talk to her recently, about these issues. And she's even evaluating whether these high contact sports should be in schools, especially for girls, because some schools, I think in Sydney, have banned it.
Yeah. So given the conversations that we are now having, and certainly given the frequency of these injuries and some of the catastrophic outcomes that you've alluded to, what are the main legal implications that are arising?
At the moment, we are watching this happen in real time. The class action will, if it gets up and what happens with that will guide us as to what the courts will do with these types of claims. At the moment, we know from...
Sorry, just to backtrack there, for those who maybe don't know what's happening in this space, from a class action perspective, could you sort of fill in our audience?
Yes, sorry.
Of course.
Well, let's start with AFL. So in Victoria, a number of former football players, men, I think there are 2 women in that class action as well, are suing the various clubs for CTE and concussion-related claims, and they've been put together as a class action. It's been trundling through the courts for about 3 years now. Yeah. There's been recent attempts to have the class action declassed, and I'm not sure what the outcome of that has been to date, but I can look into that afterwards. So before that, though, before this class, so all these players got together to go against the AFL. We had the McManus versus the Knights. He was a rugby player, and his claim resolved, but without a court judgment. And there were significant issues for him because at the time they couldn't link CTE with concussion. And at the moment, the only way you can diagnose CTE is via a post-mortem, which is pretty grim. Yeah. So there's no way conclusively to diagnose it. So you're relying on a lot of sort of neuropsychological testing, sometimes taken sort of pitch side or field side, and then obviously a person's relaying of their symptoms, which, I don't know how much you've dealt with psych claims. They're probably the hardest claims to deal with because it is so subjective. And then how do people evaluate, the legitimacy of the claims? Do we give legitimacy to everybody and go, well, yeah, that's a psych injury, or is it something else? We don't know. Yeah. And we've got no way to point our finger at an organic cause for the symptoms.
Yeah. So I guess in answer to the question about what the landscape looks like. No, but it just makes me realize that the answer is that because we can't diagnose while somebody is still alive, because we don't yet have precedent from the courts, the landscape is pretty tough for lawyers like yourself to navigate because, as you said, you're responding in real time.
We are, and I think once we know sort of which way a court's going to go with the class action, that will give us some sense of, whether there are teeth to these claims. Yeah. I'm waiting to see, with bated breath, and, part of me is sad. I enjoy litigation. I enjoy, acting for my clients. I love insurance. But I think a part of me will wither slightly if the day comes that I have to sit across the table from a woman with CTE symptoms and argue the against case for them when it's something that, the science is out there now. Yeah. We should be talking about it, and preventative measures should be in place. Yeah.
Is it fair to presume that this is going to be a growing area of litigation and certainly of insurance practices like Clyde Co's moving forward, that this is only going to get bigger, it's not going to get smaller?
I think so at the moment. I think we're going to see I mean, there's the Senate papers, there's the sports concussion group that are releasing guidance to mainly elite players. And hopefully then we only see a period of claims, if they are to get up, in what I call the dark days, where before we had that knowledge. And then hopefully, as we have that knowledge and people are more proactive in bringing in protocols and guidance, those claims might taper off. That's what I hope happens.
Yeah.
And we're more careful about our kids. My only concern is the trickle-down effect. We focus so much on elite sport.
Yeah.
What are we doing at the semi-professional, amateur and grassroots level?
Yeah.
What are we doing at schools? What are we doing for local clubs? Will that be problematic for them if they are not following the guidance of, the elites and the publications that come out, and we see a lot of players getting injured over time in these clubs.
Yeah.
How do they afford, the consequences of multiple claims? That's a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, and I'm with you on the need to better protect kids as well. I mean, as I said to you before we came in to do the recording, I had a concussion as a teenager at cricket training, and I desperately want my toddler to be wearing his helmet to go on his bike, otherwise he's not allowed to do so. And I imagine that one of the reasons we desperately need to protect children is the lack of development physically and certainly emotionally, psychologically. And I have no scientific knowledge one way or the other, but I can only imagine that the impact of such injuries on a child could be truly devastating.
Absolutely, and we may not know it for years and years to come. So if you take CTE, for example, you could play 5-10 years having these subconcussive knocks, but the symptoms aren't going to eventuate for another 10 years on that.
Yeah.
So for kids, when you think about that, we have no idea the impact on their development. But I mean, we are seeing some good stuff happening. So my nephew, he's a mad soccer fan.
Yeah.
He plays soccer at school. He's 7, and they don't allow headers.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And they don't, they're not missing out because they can't do headers. I mean, he still tries to do bicycle kicks, and that's cool. And, they don't need it. So I think putting in place these protective measures now will help us in the future. And then we don't have this sort of asbestos type situation where, I don't know if you remember in the day, but the reports had come out in the 60s that asbestos was bad.
Yeah.
Nobody did anything about it. And then we're fast forward into, the early 2000s when I was doing it, and these claims were just busting out of everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not as prolific, obviously, because loads of people used asbestos. Not everybody plays contact sport. So it's more confined in that respect. But it's knowing when that trigger point is to say, well, hang on, we've got that information now. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah. So, perhaps head injuries and concussion may not be the next asbestos or the asbestos of this generation, but it sounds as though it could very well be something truly significant from a litigious standpoint, maybe not to the same extent, but to a similar extent.
I agree. And I think from a social perspective as well, I mean, obviously putting the insurance point to one side, but nobody wants to see people with these types of injuries, suffer the way they do. And if the end point of CTE is suicide, we can't have that in society.
No.
And the depression that, happens as part of the evolution of this disease is horrendous. And I just think that's intolerable from a human perspective.
Yeah. Janine, I just have a few more questions for you, which we'll get to on the other side of this. So, Janine, what are the implications for the insurance space as a result of everything we're talking about?
That's a tough question. I know that, for example, some insurers, and this is publicised, so I'm not speaking out of school, have pulled out of, offering insurance for sort of elite sport, for high contact sport.
Yeah.
So, one of the downsides could be the absence of big players in the market. So the market could shrink for who's going to be offering the type of insurance that clubs and players need. Premiums obviously are a big issue. We spoke about that earlier. And then, conditions and exclusions in policies. So, the consequences of this is tough for insurers, players, clubs, and it can have that knock-on effect. And, I talked in the beginning about having that balance, where there's a huge influx of claims. No one has done anything to prevent, the negligence from occurring. That balance then tips one way, and that's not a good outcome.
So what does a lawyer like yourself need to be doing then? As we mentioned earlier, we're reacting to all of this in real time, and in light of what you just said there about some insurers may not want to offer cover here, how can you and or lawyers like yourself provide optimal client service delivery here to insurers and to anyone else?
So my job at the moment would be to highlight the risk, the emerging risk, to talk about it. Counsel, particularly brokers, they have an incredible part to play now to liaise with their clients about, the risks going forward. And what they need to do to kind of mitigate any impact on, their ability to obtain proper insurance going forward and the cost of their insurance going forward, and start having those conversations. Because I can tell you, I'm sure a lot of my insured clients get sick of me turning up when there's a claim going, where's your policies, where's your risk assessments, where's your swims, what's happening? And I think we need to avoid that, especially in these types of claims, by having brokers talking to the insureds, people doing their proper risk assessments, everybody getting their, documents and ducks in a row to protect our girls. And, there's a lot of information about that now.
And what would be your broad guidance to lawyers working in this space about how they can ensure that they are bringing their best selves to work to support their clients across the board?
I think with these types of claims and with psych claims generally, because we're seeing a big rise in psychological claims. It's an emerging risk and trend, is to act with empathy. And have patience. These claims take some time to unfold. It takes time to get your head around the medicine. Head injuries specifically are quite complicated, where you have the interplay between neurological, neuropsychological, and neuropsychiatry evidence all working together. So you really need to have an understanding of that type of medicine. Insofar as we can, we're not doctors. We rely on our medical experts for that. And realize there's just not one size fits all, I think.
Janine, just finally, are you able to make any predictions for what might happen in this space moving forward? Obviously, we're waiting on precedent from the courts, and there'll no doubt be further scientific breakthroughs, in this space. But from a legal standpoint, what do you think is likely to happen moving forward, and how can a lawyer like yourself be ready?
That's a good question. The answer is I don't know. And I want people to have access to justice. So, if there is a causation link that can be identified between, concussion and CTE, I want to know about it. We're better able to advise our clients if we know something than if we sit there in limbo going, we don't know. It's a case by case, typical lawyer comments. It depends on the facts. It's a case by case. If that link is to be established, I want to know. And then we can start to prepare for it. We can understand that, okay, it may take a different approach to handling these claims. So I always caution people who do psych claims, they must be handled differently to, say, a broken leg. A broken leg you can see, broken arm you can see it on x-ray, it's there, when it's healed. You can't do that with these types of claims. So it requires a different touch. And so I would be, getting ready for that, getting my people and my clients and my insureds around the medicine, because it is complicated, around the timescales for how long these claims might go, and then obviously getting our reserving right, because that's quite important.
Janine Clark, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you to the listener for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give us a rating and review on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts, as it'll help other lawyers discover and enjoy this show. And if you've got ideas for other episodes we can run, please get in touch at editor@lawyersweekly.com.au. You can also reach us on social media. See you again next time.